My wife joked at an elite party. $100 and a burger. He's yours. Our younger neighbor smiled, handed her 1,000, and said, deal. Wife's smile vanished. When I convinced my wife, Jasmine, to move into a new neighborhood, I genuinely thought I was buying peace of mind. You know, bigger kitchen, clean sidewalks, lawns so manicured you could eat sushi off them, and neighbors who actually waved without asking for jumper cables. It sounded like the American dream, or at least the deluxe version of it. We'd been living in a cramped townhouse where the walls were thinner than my patience, and the upstairs neighbor thought quiet hours was a suggestion. I figured this move was a solid win. Fresh air, new scenery, no more arguments about parking spaces. But the thing about peace? Turns out, it comes with a mortgage and hidden fees. Jasmine called it a fresh start, but what she really meant was a new audience. Because from the second our moving truck rolled into Maplewood Heights, she turned into some sort of suburban influencer, like we were filming season 1 of Keeping Up with the Homeowners. I'll never forget our first morning there. I was in my old jeans, covered in dust and optimism, unloading boxes like a man trying to impress karma. The movers, two teenagers who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else, were shuffling around pretending to care. Jasmine was supervising from the kitchen island, sipping iced coffee like she was auditioning for an HGTV show. Then, mid-sip, she snapped her fingers at me. Aaron, she said, wipe the counters properly. Not like we're renting. I looked down at my hands, then at my steel-toe boots, then back at her. I said, sure, boss. Should I clock in or just donate the labor? She didn't laugh. The movers did, though, which earned them a death glare that could peel wallpaper. I think one of them actually mouthed, dude, run. I smiled at him, but deep down, I already knew. I wasn't in charge anymore. I was the unpaid help in a two-person dictatorship. Jasmine had this way of making ordinary things sound like personal failings. If I carried boxes too slowly, I was wasting daylight. If I moved too fast, I was reckless. She could find fault in a sunrise if it didn't match the curtains. The irony? I'd picked this house for her. The open-concept kitchen, the walk-in closet that could double as a studio apartment, the backyard with the perfect space for her Pinterest dreams. But somehow, I became the villain of our own home improvement story. By lunchtime, I was drenched in sweat and resentment, and she was arranging throw pillows like they were guests of honor. This one goes here, she said, moving it 2 inches to the left. Not there. It has to feel intentional. I muttered, yeah, because nothing says home like a perfectly positioned rectangle of fluff. She ignored me. The movers pretended to die of thirst. I ended up giving them bottled water and hazard pay in the form of sympathy. You know that feeling when you're halfway through something and realize you've made a terrible mistake, but it's too late to turn back? That was me, standing in my dream kitchen, realizing I'd just signed up for a full-time job as Jasmine's unpaid project manager. She strutted through the house like a real estate agent showing it off to imaginary buyers. Look at this light, Aaron, she said. We'll have such amazing mornings here. I was tempted to tell her the only thing amazing so far was how fast she'd turned from wife to supervisor. But I didn't, because I still believed she was just stressed from the move. Spoiler alert, she wasn't stressed. She was warming up. Later that evening, I sat on the porch with a beer, trying to convince myself that things would settle down once the boxes were gone. The neighborhood looked peaceful, street lamps glowing, distant laughter from some backyard gathering, a dog barking like it owned the zip code. It was everything we'd talked about. But inside, Jasmine was reorganizing the spice rack for the 4th time, muttering about presentation. I watched her through the window, head tilted, eyebrows furrowed in concentration, and thought, we used to laugh together while doing this kind of stuff. Now, I couldn't remember the last time she'd laughed at anything I said unless it was in front of someone else. The next morning, she woke up early, 6 a.m. sharp, and started playing an inspirational podcast loud enough to make the walls reconsider their purpose. Something about elevating your energy to attract abundance. I stumbled into the kitchen in my pajamas, rubbing my eyes. She looked at me, all smiles, and said, you should try gratitude journaling. I said, I'm already grateful I survived your moving checklist. She didn't appreciate the humor. Aaron, she sighed, we need to take this new phase seriously. It's a house, not a religion, I muttered. But to Jasmine, it was a religion, complete with rituals, commandments, and a husband who needed redemption. Every decision became a committee vote where only one person got a say. She'd ask, "Do you like this rug?" And before I could answer, she'd say, "Good, I knew you'd agree." I started feeling like a backup dancer in her home makeover fantasy. When I suggested we rest a day before tackling the garage, she looked horrified. "Rest? Aaron, people will drive by. What if they see clutter?" I blinked. "You mean inside the garage? Behind a closed door?" She said, "Yes. It's about energy." I said, "Right. Because God forbid the universe sees our extra paint cans." She glared. I drank my coffee. We reached an unspoken truce where she pretended not to hear me, and I pretended to care. Still, part of me wanted it to work. I told myself she'd calm down once she realized perfection isn't a mortgage requirement. But perfection was her fuel. She decorated, organized, color-coded. Hell, she even scheduled unstructured time. I caught her doing it once. "You literally plan spontaneity," I said. "It's called balance," she snapped. "It's called insanity," I replied. That was the day she stopped asking for my opinion altogether, which honestly felt like a promotion. Then came the moment that told me I was in real trouble. I just finished setting up the new TV, proud of myself for not breaking anything expensive. She came in, hands on hips, stared at the screen, and said, "Why is the TV stand 1 inch off center?" I laughed. "You measured it?" She said, dead serious. "It throws off the symmetry of the room." I thought she was joking. She wasn't. So I fixed it. Because somewhere along the line, I'd learned that peace was cheaper than principle. That night, as I sat in bed scrolling through my phone, Jasmine turned to me and said, "Aren't you happy?" "It's perfect here." I looked around. Immaculate house, spotless kitchen, muted lighting straight out of a catalog, and felt this weird emptiness. Everything was perfect. Except us. "Yeah," I said softly. "It's perfect." She smiled, kissed me on the cheek, and said, "Good. Tomorrow we'll meet the neighbors. I want them to see we fit in." That's when it hit me. This wasn't about a home. This was about her debut. A new neighborhood, new audience, same performance. And me? I was the unwilling co-star in her scripted perfection. Still, I played along. Because I loved her. Or maybe I loved who she used to be. Before every smile came with a side of judgment, and every compliment felt like a report card. When I turned off the lights, I lay there listening to her steady breathing, the house creaking like it was settling into its foundation. I thought about all the years we'd spent building toward this dream, how I'd worked overtime, sacrificed weekends, made promises to a future version of us that apparently never got the memo. And as the moonlight hit the window frame, I realized the truth I didn't want to admit. I hadn't moved into perfection. I'd moved into performance. The next morning, I woke up to Jasmine already dressed, hair curled, phone in hand, filming a new home video for her social media. "Smile, babe," she said without looking at me. I forced one. And right there, mid-yawn, mid-fake smile, I saw our reflection in the window. Her, glowing with control, and me, fading behind it. And that's how our so-called dream home began. Jasmine directing the show, me stuck in the background lighting. She thought I'd bought her peace. What I'd really bought was a front-row ticket to my own quiet unraveling. By week 1 in the new neighborhood, I learned that Maplewood Heights wasn't just a collection of houses, it was a gated religion. Everyone there worshipped at the altar of appearances. Lawns trimmed to military precision, driveways polished like showroom floors, and residents who smiled so hard their cheeks probably had gym memberships. It was step forward, but with better Wi-Fi. Our grand introduction came courtesy of Ronald, the HOA president, neighborhood czar, and self-proclaimed guardian of community aesthetics. The man looked like he ironed his jeans and moisturized his soul with policy manuals. He arrived carrying a binder thicker than a Bible and a smile that could curdle milk. "Welcome to Maplewood Heights," he said, handing us a rulebook that looked more intimidating than my mortgage. "You'll find everything you need in there." I flipped it open. Page 1. Trash must be out by 7 a.m. Fridays and brought in by 7 p.m. the same day. Page 2. Hedges must be uniformly trimmed to maintain visual harmony. Page 3. No street parking after midnight. My favorite. All outdoor decor must align with community aesthetics. Translation: don't make us look poor. I looked at Ronald and asked, "So, no inflatable Santas, huh?" He chuckled politely. The kind of chuckle that says, "You're funny, but I'll find you anyway." Jasmine, of course, was enthralled. "Thank you so much," she said, clutching the binder like it was the Declaration of Independence. I could see it in her eyes. She'd just found her new purpose. Ronald left us with a final gem. We pride ourselves on excellence. It's what keeps our property values and our spirits high. Then he looked directly at me, like I was a potential code violation waiting to happen. "You'll fit right in." "Yeah, sure, Ron. I'll get right on my hedge meditation." A day later, we met the neighbors across the street, Chase and Taylor. Picture the kind of couple Instagram would create if it learned how to bake humans. Chase was in his mid-30s, fit, tanned, and the kind of guy who jogs before breakfast and actually enjoys it. Taylor was effortlessly charming, sarcastic, sharp, and friendly in a way that didn't feel forced. She brought over a plate of cookies that looked professionally baked. Jasmine nearly levitated. "Oh my God, these look amazing," she said, voice dripping with admiration. She complimented Taylor's dress and Chase's watch in the same breath, like she was auditioning for the Real Housewives of Maplewood. Meanwhile, I was still holding the cookies, trying to figure out whether they were homemade or a trap. "If you need anything," Taylor said warmly, "we're right across the street." I smiled. "Appreciate it. We're still figuring out the dishwasher, so maybe start praying for us." Chase laughed, a full, genuine laugh that made me instantly like the guy. Jasmine, however, gave me the look. The "don't embarrass me in front of the perfect people" look. From that point on, it was game on for her. She started taking mental notes: Taylor's floral arrangements, Chase's workout schedule, their lawn's suspiciously straight-edge lines. It wasn't neighborly curiosity, it was competitive reconnaissance. She even whispered once, "They're nice, but look at that garage door. We can do better." I said, "Babe, it's a garage door, not a personality test." She ignored me, scrolling Zillow like she was studying enemy intel. By midweek, Jasmine had reinvented herself as the unofficial PR director of our block. She scheduled morning yoga sessions in the backyard, right when Chase went jogging past. Coincidence? Please. She bought matching gardening gloves and said, "We should start a herb garden. Everyone's doing it." "You mean Taylor's doing it?" I corrected. "Exactly," she said, as if I'd just validated a PhD thesis. Meanwhile, I tried to bond with the guys. There was Dave from 3 houses down, a quiet IT engineer who looked perpetually haunted by his sprinkler system, and Mark, a financial advisor who somehow found a way to mention the stock market during a barbecue. "Man," Mark said, flipping burgers, "the HOA's strict, but it's for the best. Keeps the riffraff out." I took a sip of my beer. "Cool. Just out of curiosity, when did I sign up to be the riffraff?" He laughed, thinking I was joking. I wasn't. Every evening, Jasmine gave me debriefings like we were running a political campaign. "Taylor drives a Range Rover," she said one night. "Probably 2022. Chase mentioned his firm had record profits this year." I stared at her. "Why do I feel like you're building a case file instead of making friends?" "It's called being observant, Aaron. It's called being FBI with better nail polish." She rolled her eyes. "You're impossible." "And you're impossible to impress," I shot back. She pretended not to hear that part. The first Friday night, the neighborhood had what they called a welcome mixer. Basically a potluck for people who only eat organic kale and passive aggression. Ronald hosted it, of course. The man had a name tag that read Ronald H. HOA president since 2011, as if anyone had been trying to overthrow his regime. The table was lined with perfectly portioned dishes, gluten-free pasta, sugar-free desserts, and personality-free conversation. "So, Aaron," Ronald said, approaching me mid-sip of beer, "what do you do for work?" "Corporate risk management," I replied. "Oh, so you're a fixer?" "More like a professional firefighter without the cool uniform." He didn't laugh. "Tough crowd." "And Jasmine?" he asked, turning to her. "She runs her own event planning business," I said. Jasmine beamed. "We focus on upscale gatherings, exclusive clientele." That was news to me. Last time I checked, her business was a one-woman operation with a website that still said under construction. But hey, new neighborhood, new lies. Ronald nodded approvingly. "We could use someone like you for our annual charity gala." Jasmine's eyes lit up like a Christmas tree. "I'd love that." I could already hear the spreadsheets forming in her head. Great. My weekend just got hijacked by centerpieces and canapes. As the night went on, Conversations got painfully polite. Your shutters are such a lovely shade of beige, one woman said to another, as if that was an actual sentence humans say. Thank you, the other replied. We call it driftwood harmony. I whispered to Jasmine. If I ever start complimenting beige, shoot me. She elbowed me. Behave. Then Chase came over, casual as ever, holding a plate of wings. Man, this place is something, huh? I smirked. Yeah, like living in a brochure that threatens to fine you. He laughed. Taylor joined us, and for a moment, I forgot the whole Stepford vibe. They were normal, real. I needed that. Jasmine, though, had her eyes on Taylor's diamond earrings like she was tracking market shares. When we got home that night, she was glowing. Everyone loved us, she said. You were a little sarcastic, but it worked. Sarcasm is my love language, I said, dropping my keys. Also, are you aware you volunteered us for a gala? Correction, she said. I volunteered me. You just get to lift things. Yes, I said. The dream continues. Over the next few days, the neighborhood showed its true colors. People waved from a distance, but gossiped up close. If your trash can was crooked, someone would fix it and leave a sticky note. We're all in this together. Translation, don't embarrass us again. I once parked my truck facing the wrong way, and within 20 minutes, Ronald appeared like Batman fueled by passive-aggressive righteousness. We just want to make sure everyone follows the rules, he said. I said, oh, totally. Wouldn't want the cul-de-sac collapsing from chaos. He didn't get the sarcasm. Jasmine, watching from the porch, mouthed, apologize. I mouthed back for existing. But the real kicker came one sunny afternoon when Taylor invited Jasmine to join a ladies' brunch. I didn't think much of it until Jasmine came home hours later, smiling like she'd been knighted. Taylor says we should redecorate the foyer, she announced. Apparently ours feels transitional. Transitional to what? I asked. A psychiatric ward? Aaron, she scolded. It's called constructive feedback. It's called psychological warfare, I replied. That night, while she was sketching new layout ideas, I realized something crucial. Jasmine didn't just want to fit in, she wanted to win. She wanted to be queen of the cul-de-sac, admired, envied, photographed. And me? I was her reluctant plus one, the guy holding the camera while she posed. Still, part of me couldn't help but laugh. We'd moved to escape stress, and somehow ended up living inside it. I used to think adulthood was about owning a home. Now I knew it was about pretending your life's perfect enough to justify the HOA fees. Before bed, I stood by the window, watching Chase jog under the streetlights, Taylor waving from their porch, Ronald adjusting his mailbox to perfect alignment. The whole place was a performance, polished, scripted, immaculate, and right in the middle of it was Jasmine, rehearsing her next act. I took a sip of water and muttered, "Welcome to the land of perfect people." Then I turned off the lights, already dreading the next episode of our suburban sitcom. By the second week in Maplewood Heights, I realized politeness wasn't a virtue here, it was a weapon. Every smile was loaded. Every "how are you?" meant, "why are you still here?" And every compliment carried the emotional weight of a lawsuit. I didn't know you could die from good manners until Jasmine decided to join the suburban elite full-time. Suddenly, every hour of our lives had a theme, a purpose, and, God help me, a spreadsheet. It started innocently enough. Monday morning, Jasmine announced, "We need a schedule." I thought she meant for unpacking. Nope, she meant for life. "We'll have decor updates every Wednesday," she said, tapping on her iPad like she was unveiling a NASA launch plan. "Yoga and gratitude journaling Thursday. Neighborhood brunch Saturday. Oh, and the garage, Sunday cleanup." I blinked. "You just planned my nervous breakdown." She smirked. "You'll thank me when we're organized." Organized? We were two people and a goldfish. This wasn't the Pentagon. Tuesday, we went to Home Depot. A simple trip for paint turned into a 4-hour episode of public marital humiliation. She held up paint swatches and asked, "Do you like eggshell or ivory?" I said they looked the same. The cashier chuckled. Jasmine didn't. She raised an eyebrow and said, loud enough for the whole aisle to hear, "You know, he'll make 3 holes to hang 1 frame. It's part of his process." I smiled at the cashier and said, "Yeah, practice makes perfect. I'm just training to escape." The poor kid laughed. Jasmine didn't. I swear I saw her mentally file a complaint with the Department of Spousal Image Control. You're being sensitive. No, I said. I'm being married. It's funny how those two things feel identical sometimes. To cope, I made a shared Google Sheet for our home projects, budget tracking, deadlines, even notes. It was color-coded. I called it Operation Sanity. Jasmine called it micromanaging. Erin, she said, you're sucking the fun out of this. Fun? I asked. The fun part was over when Ronald handed us the HOA Bible. She rolled her eyes. You're impossible. And yet, I said, you married me. That was the last civil exchange of the evening. By Friday, she'd hit a new level of social ambition. We're hosting a neighborhood brunch next weekend, she declared over dinner, like she'd just announced a royal wedding. No arguments. I looked up from my plate. We're what? Hosting. It's time people know who we are. I nearly choked on my food. Jasmine, we've been here 2 weeks. Maybe we should let them forget our moving truck block traffic for an hour first. She shook her head. Perception matters. People should see us as established. We're still using boxes as nightstands. Details, she said, waving her fork. We'll manage. Okay, I said. But just one rule. No jokes about me in front of people. She laughed. Oh, please, don't be dramatic. Dramatic? Lady, I was living in a performance art piece called Marriage and Other Poor Life Choices. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of her humming. That's never good. Happy Jasmine meant mission mode. I walked into the kitchen and saw printouts everywhere. Menu ideas, seating plans, even color palettes for napkins. We're going with sage green and cream, she said. It feels approachable. It feels like guacamole, I muttered. Erin, she said sharply, this matters. To who? To everyone. You mean to the 4 people who care about hedge symmetry? She gave me a death glare that could power the grid. When I suggested hiring help, she said, we don't need to spend money when we have you. You say that like I come with free shipping. She ignored me, scribbling clean windows on her to-do list. I said, oh good. Wouldn't want Ronald to catch us with smudges. He might revoke our suburban citizenship. She just sighed, muttering something about how sarcasm was not a personality. I disagree. It's my only surviving defense mechanism. Midweek, she added dress rehearsal to the calendar. I thought she was kidding. She wasn't. Thursday night, I found myself holding a tray of appetizers while she practiced walking between the kitchen and the dining room. Timing matters, she said, handing me a stopwatch. For what? Are we hosting dinner or competing in the Olympics? She didn't even blink. If you serve drinks too fast, people won't mingle. Too slow, and they'll get bored. Right, I said. God forbid they realize we're normal. By Friday, I was fried. The neighborhood's relentless niceness was suffocating. People waved like animatronic mannequins, complimented my lawn before criticizing it, and ended every conversation with, we should do dinner sometime, which everyone knew was code for never. I caught myself smiling too much just to survive. That's when it hit me. I'd been infected. Politeness poisoning. A slow, creeping disease that makes you nod while your soul quietly screams. Jasmine, meanwhile, was thriving. Every morning, she'd step outside with a coffee, pretending to check the mail just to run into Taylor from across the street. They'd chat about drapes, candles, and whatever cryptic HOA decree dropped that week. I called it the Maplewood Summit. When I teased her about it, she said, networking is essential here. Networking? It's a cul-de-sac, not Silicon Valley. You never know who people are, she said cryptically. Exactly, I replied. That's why I don't talk to them. Saturday morning, she dragged me to a local farmer's market to buy authentic organic produce for the brunch. I told her the tomatoes at Walmart were just as authentic. They were grown by disappointment and capitalism. Erin, she warned, tone it down. I'm sorry, I said. Do you want me to pretend to care about kale now or later? She didn't answer. Instead, she picked out a $12 jar of artisanal honey because presentation matters. I picked out a $6 beer because survival matters. That night, while she arranged the table for the 5th time, I realized something strange. I wasn't even mad anymore. I was tired. Tired of being the comic relief in her quest for perfection. Tired of pretending that passive-aggressive kindness wasn't just hostility with better lighting. I'd moved us here to find peace. But somehow, I was living in a polite apocalypse where no one raised their voice. They just smiled harder. As I sat there on the couch, I thought back to when we first met. Jasmine wasn't like this then. She used to laugh at everything. She'd make fun of people who obsessed over appearances. We'd eat pizza on the floor, talk about running away to the mountains, and dream about a future that didn't include HOA rulebooks or brunch seating charts. Somewhere between I do and don't forget to wipe the counters properly, that version of her disappeared. And maybe mine did too. Still, I wasn't ready to give up. So, I tried to meet her halfway. I helped with the setup. I polished glasses, moved furniture, and even pretended to care about floral arrangements. These look great, I said, pointing at the roses. They're peonies, she corrected. Of course they are, I said, because clearly my masculinity didn't extend to botany. When she went to bed, I sat on the porch with a beer, listening to the faint hum of sprinklers and the distant chirping of crickets that sounded like they were judging me. I thought about how every person here was probably fighting the same quiet war, trying to look perfect while hiding the chaos underneath. That's what death by politeness really is. It's when you can't scream, so you smile instead. The night before the big brunch, Jasmine stood in front of the mirror adjusting her dress, rehearsing her greetings out loud. Hi, so good to see you. No, we've just been settling in. Oh, you noticed the accent wall? Thank you. Yes, it was Erin's idea. I was in bed pretending to sleep, but that last part made me grin. Maybe there was still hope. Maybe she'd remembered I existed. Then she looked at her reflection and said, "No, that sounds fake. Make it about me." And just like that, hope died again. I turned away, staring at the ceiling, and whispered to myself, tomorrow's gonna be a long day. And it was. The next morning, Jasmine woke me up at dawn. We need to get started, she said. The guests arrive at noon. I looked at the clock. It's 6. Exactly. Time flies when you're not ready. Can I at least fly back to bed first? Erin. One word. One warning. I got up. By 9 a.m., the house looked like a magazine cover. Candles lit, pastries arranged, not a speck of dust in sight. Jasmine inspected every corner like she was judging a crime scene. Perfect, she said finally, exhaling with satisfaction. I nodded. Yep, perfect. But deep down, I knew this wasn't perfection. This was pressure wearing makeup. When I looked out the window and saw our neighbors approaching, Ronald in a pastel polo, Taylor carrying another plate of cookies, and Chase walking beside her with that perfect confident grin, I realized we were about to put on a show. And I was the reluctant co-star again. I straightened my shirt, plastered on a smile, and whispered under my breath, "Welcome to death by politeness." Then I opened the door, ready for the performance to begin. Little did I know, the real drama was still warming up backstage. The night of the party felt like the suburban Super Bowl. Jasmine had been in game mode all week, color palettes, catering menus, music playlists. By Saturday morning, she was pacing the kitchen with a Bluetooth headset like a general commanding a military operation. "No, Brad," I said, "fairy lights, not LED strips." She barked into the phone. "This is a celebration, not a frat house." I was halfway through my coffee, debating whether to fake food poisoning, when she turned to me and said, "Erin, make yourself useful. Check if the bartenders arrived." Bartenders. Plural. For a neighborhood party. Sure, I muttered. Wouldn't want to underperform at our royal gala. By 6 p.m., our house looked like a Pottery Barn catalog threw up in it. Every corner sparkled. Chandeliers glowed like interrogation lights. The catering staff moved like synchronized swimmers, and I swear there were enough floral arrangements to host a royal funeral. I'd lost track of how much money she'd spent, but judging by the rented jazz trio in the corner, I was guessing too much. Jasmine floated down the stairs in a black dress that probably had its own insurance policy. She looked stunning, terrifying, but stunning. "Smile," she said. "We want to appear approachable." Approachable? You just yelled at a man named Brad for 3 hours. Brad deserved it, she said flatly. When the first guests arrived, Jasmine transformed. Her voice softened. Her laughter became effortless. Her smile could have powered the state. She greeted everyone like she was hosting the Oscars. "So glad you could make it, Ronald. You look fabulous." Ronald, our dear HOA president, walked in wearing khakis that probably came with a certificate of authenticity. "Everything looks exquisite, Jasmine," he said, handing her a bottle of wine that looked suspiciously like something from Costco. "We do what we can," she replied. "Erin's been so helpful." That last part was said with the same tone you use when you thank a Roomba. I stationed myself near the bar. It was safer there, fewer chances of saying something that would get me murdered later. I was pouring drinks, handing out polite smiles, and trying to pretend I cared about Chardonnay pairings. The music was smooth, the conversation smoother, and I was one fake grin away from evaporating into thin air. The neighbors filed in like extras on a movie set. Chase and Taylor, of course, looking effortlessly perfect. Taylor gave me a real smile, the kind that doesn't require Botox or ambition. Chase clapped me on the shoulder. "Man, this is impressive," he said. "You sure you didn't hire a production team?" I laughed. "Oh, I did. Her name's Jasmine." An hour in, the house was full of laughter and subtle judgment. I overheard one woman compliment our lighting while whispering about how her husband still hadn't built their deck. Another guy asked me where I worked, and when I said corporate risk management, he nodded like I'd confessed to being a janitor. "That's practical," he said. Translation: "I'm not rich enough to matter." I smiled. "Yeah, I specialize in cleaning up other people's mistakes. Keeps me busy." Meanwhile, Jasmine was in her element, telling stories, charming guests, and casually dropping mentions of her event planning business, like it was an empire instead of a laptop and a Canva subscription. She was radiant, magnetic, and completely in control. Until, of course, she wasn't. It started when Ronald raised his glass for a toast. "To our new neighbors, Aaron and Jasmine. May Maplewood Heights continue to shine." Everyone clinked glasses. Jasmine took the moment and ran with it, because of course she did. "Thank you, Ronald," she said, her voice carrying across the room. "It's been such a joy settling here. Everyone keeps asking how I got so lucky." She paused for effect, smiling wide. "So here's the deal. I'll sell my husband for $100 and a burger. Any takers?" The laughter was instant. Loud. Shrill. The kind that stings. My smile froze mid-sip. Even the jazz trio hit a wrong note. I looked at her. She was grinning, basking in the attention, completely unaware that she'd just crossed the line between funny and humiliating. I could feel heat rising in my neck, that slow, quiet kind of anger that doesn't explode. It sharpens. I wanted to laugh it off, keep the peace. But something inside me said no. Not this time. Then, like divine timing, Chase, perfect, smirking, marathon-running Chase, reached into his wallet, pulled out a stack of crisp hundreds, and said, "Deal." He dropped them on the counter. "He looks like he's worth more." The room went dead silent. Jasmine's face fell. Her fake laugh turned into a nervous choke. Everyone turned to me. The moment stretched, 10, maybe 15 seconds, but it felt like a lifetime. Then I raised my glass and smiled. "Wow, I just got a raise." "Thanks, Chase. Guess I'm the premium husband package." The crowd erupted in laughter, this time the real kind. The kind that belonged to the underdog, the guy who refused to be the punchline. Jasmine's expression hardened instantly. Her smile vanished. She looked like someone had spilled red wine on her ego. I took a slow sip, met her eyes, and gave her a polite nod. The message was clear. You started this. I'm finishing it. The rest of the night blurred. Conversations resumed, but I caught the sideways glances, the whispering. Ronald pretended not to hear. Taylor tried to steer the attention elsewhere, but the damage was done. Jasmine spent the rest of the evening pretending to laugh at jokes she didn't hear. Every time someone walked by, she adjusted her dress or her hair, like control could erase embarrassment. I, on the other hand, had the best night of my life. I became everyone's new favorite conversationalist. People were suddenly eager to talk to me, to laugh with me. "You handled that like a pro," someone whispered. I would have died. I shrugged. "You get used to it." Even Chase raised his glass later and said, "Respect, man." I smiled but didn't clink glasses. I'd seen how he looked at Jasmine. I didn't need his respect. By midnight, the party had thinned out. The jazz trio packed up. The caterers left behind a graveyard of wine glasses and crumbs. Jasmine stood in the kitchen, arms crossed, staring at me. "You embarrassed me," she said coldly. "Oh, I'm sorry," I replied. "I thought you embarrassed me. My mistake. You didn't have to make it awkward." "Awkward? Jasmine, you tried to auction me off like a used car. I just raised the price." She clenched her jaw. "Do you always have to turn everything into a joke?" "Only when everything's already a circus," I said. She looked like she wanted to argue but couldn't find the words. So instead, she started cleaning. Not the dishes, of course. She started picking at the decorations, the flowers, the candles, like maybe rearranging them could fix her pride. I just watched her for a moment. She was furious, humiliated, and trying to act like none of it mattered. I took a deep breath, grabbed a beer, and stepped outside to the porch. The night air was cool, the quiet almost foreign after all the noise. Across the street, I saw Taylor stepping out to take the trash. She noticed me and gave a small, sympathetic wave. I raised my beer in silent acknowledgement. She mouthed, "You okay?" I nodded. Barely. When I went back inside, Jasmine was gone. I found her upstairs, sitting on the edge of the bed, makeup smudged but posture perfect. "Why do you always have to ruin things?" she whispered. "Ruin things? You mean not letting you roast me for applause?" She looked at me, eyes cold. "You're impossible. You're impossible to please," I said. "But at least one of us is honest about it." She stood up, brushing past me. "You'll never understand what it takes to make a good impression." "Oh, I understand perfectly," I said. "It takes pretending to be someone else. You're great at it." She stopped at the doorway, turned back, and said, "You think this neighborhood cares about you? About us? They care about appearances." "Then congratulations," I said. "You fit right in." She left without another word, closing the door just hard enough to prove a point. I sat on the bed for a long time, listening to the echo. Somewhere downstairs, a candle still flickered, forgotten. The air smelled like perfume and disappointment. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the way the crowd laughed, first at me, then with me. The shift was small, but it meant everything. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like the side character in her story. I'd taken the mic back, and even if the whole damn neighborhood was watching, it felt good. Around 2 a.m., I went back downstairs. The lights were still on. The bills Chase had thrown were sitting on the counter, next to the half-empty wine bottle. I picked them up, folded them neatly, and slipped them into my wallet. "A tip for emotional labor," I muttered. Then I looked around at the wreckage of our perfect night. Half-eaten hors d'oeuvres, lipstick-stained glasses, the faint echo of jazz that had outlasted the love in this house, and laughed quietly to myself. Jasmine wanted to impress the neighborhood. She did, just not the way she planned. And me? I might have been the punchline at first, but somewhere between her insult and Chase's $100 joke, I'd remembered something important. I still had a sense of humor. And apparently, that's worth at least $1,000. When I finally went to bed, the house was silent. Jasmine was asleep, back turned, her breathing steady. I lay there staring at the ceiling, wide awake, replaying the night in my head. The laughter, the look on her face, the moment I stopped caring what anyone thought. It felt liberating. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the blinds, and I woke up smiling, a dangerous, quiet kind of smile. Because something had shifted, something permanent. She thought she'd hosted a party for the neighborhood. She had no idea she'd just hosted my awakening. And as I stood in that spotless kitchen, sipping my coffee and staring at the crumpled napkin that still smelled faintly of her perfume, I realized something. Perfection isn't a neighborhood, or a house, or a party. It's a prison. And for the first time, I was planning my escape. The morning after the party felt like waking up in a courtroom where I was both the defendant and the evidence. The house was quiet, but it wasn't peace. It was the kind of silence that hums. The air was thick, and the only sound came from the hum of the fridge and my internal monologue rehearsing all the ways the previous night could have gone less explosive. I woke up before Jasmine did. She was still turned away from me in bed, hair perfectly still even in sleep, like even her dreams refused to be messy. I stood there for a second, watching her breathe, remembering how she used to look at me like I was home. Now she looked at me like I was her PR liability. I headed downstairs, still in the same shirt from the night before, because laundry was the least of my concerns. The kitchen was a battlefield of empty wine glasses, lipstick stains, and emotional debris. A few napkins were stuck to the counter like ghosts of conversations I wanted to forget. I poured myself coffee, black and bitter, which matched the mood perfectly. The sunlight came through the blinds, cutting harsh lines across the marble. It was too bright for how hungover my dignity felt. I was mid-sip when I heard her heels clicking down the stairs. War drums. She walked in wearing that silk robe, the one she wore when she wanted to seem calm, but was plotting something. She didn't say good morning. She didn't even look at me, just started rearranging things on the counter that didn't need rearranging. "You could at least start cleaning up," she said finally, her voice sharp enough to slice through granite. I didn't look up. Oh, I'm sorry. I was waiting for the cleanup crew you hired to fix your image. Her head snapped toward me. Excuse me. You're excused, I said, taking another sip. That did it. She spun around. You just had to make it awkward last night, didn't you? Couldn't let a joke be a joke. No, you had to make yourself the victim. Joke, I said, laughing, not the fun kind. The dry, disbelieving kind that sounds like a bark. You auctioned me off for a burger in front of the whole neighborhood. I didn't know humiliation came with catering. Her jaw tightened. Everyone knew I was joking. Everyone but me. I shot back. And Chase. You remember Chase, right? The guy who paid cash for my dignity. She slammed a glass into the sink. You embarrassed me. I leaned against the counter, crossing my arms. Oh, right, because I defended myself. How dare I ruin your one-woman Broadway debut? She threw her hands up. You always do this. You can't take anything lightly. Lightly, I said, stepping forward. You turned our marriage into open mic night for your ego. Forgive me if I didn't laugh along this time. Her eyes glistened, not from tears. Jasmine didn't cry. She glared with moisture. You just love making me look bad. No, Jasmine, I said, softer now. You do that all by yourself. I just stopped editing the footage. That was the final straw. She stormed upstairs, and the slam of the bedroom door sounded like the end of a long, messy movie. I sat there for a while, letting the quiet settle, the kind of quiet that presses down on your chest. Then I walked outside. The porch had become my sanctuary, the Switzerland of our marriage. It was early enough that the world hadn't fully woken yet. The air was cool, birds doing their morning podcast, and I sat there barefoot, holding my coffee mug like it was a peace treaty. That's when I heard soft footsteps and the creak of the fence. Taylor. She stood by the sidewalk in a gray sweatshirt and leggings, holding a cup of tea, her hair pulled back. She looked tired, not from lack of sleep, but from knowing things. She gave me a small smile, the kind that says, I know what last night was. Hey, she said quietly. Hey, I replied. There was a pause, the kind that wasn't awkward, just honest. She tilted her head. You okay? I smirked. Define okay. Alive. Barely, I said. I think my self-respect's still on life support. She laughed softly, walking up the steps to sit beside me. You didn't deserve that, she said after a moment. I mean, it was funny, but it wasn't fair. Yeah, well, I said, leaning back. I've been promoted from husband to party entertainment. I should probably start charging an appearance fee. Her lips twitched. I'd pay to watch you roast Ronald next time. Don't tempt me, I said. He already thinks his khakis are bulletproof. For a while, we just sat there, watching the street come alive. Sprinklers hissing, kids on bikes, someone jogging past with a dog that clearly hated cardio. The neighborhood was waking up, pretending last night didn't happen. Taylor broke the silence first. You know, people only treat you like that if it works. I looked at her. You sound like a therapist. She shrugged. Maybe I'm just married. That line hit me harder than I expected. I didn't ask for details, but her tone said enough. There was history behind that calm. She sipped her tea. You handled it well, though? The way you turned it on them, that was good. Yeah, I said. Funny how my best material comes from trauma. She smiled, then her eyes softened. You really loved her once, didn't you? I stared into my coffee, the steam rising like ghosts of memories. Yeah, I did. Still do. In that stupid nostalgic way where you miss what you thought you had. Taylor nodded slowly. Been there. For a moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Understood. Not pitted, not lectured, just seen. Thanks, I said finally. For saying that. She shrugged again. Someone should. The rest of them are too busy pretending their marriages are flawless. I chuckled. Perfection's expensive. I'm just broke enough to be honest. That got a real laugh out of her, one that sounded like release. She looked at me for a second, then said, You're a good guy, Aaron. Don't let this place make you forget that. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. We sat there for another 10 minutes, both staring at nothing, two tired souls in a neighborhood obsessed with pretending. Then she stood. I should get back. Chase will start wondering. Right, I said. Wouldn't want to interrupt the kingdom's morning routine. She hesitated before stepping off the porch. For what it's worth, Jasmine's probably embarrassed too. I know, I said, but she'll never admit it. Then you already know more than most men here. She smiled, and for a brief second, the world felt less heavy. After she left, I stayed there, thinking about what she'd said. People only treat you like that if it works. The line played in my head over and over, until it became something else, something close to a promise. That afternoon, I cleaned up the house, not for Jasmine, not for the neighbors, but for myself. It felt weirdly liberating, wiping wine stains off the counter while humming the jazz tune that had played during my public execution. By evening, the place was spotless again, and Jasmine still hadn't come downstairs. I debated whether to knock on the door or just let it be. Part of me wanted to fix things, to talk, to find the version of us that used to laugh at stupid movies and share fries at 2 a.m. But another part of me, the part that had been trampled by 100 subtle digs and public jokes, knew it was time to start protecting my peace. Around sunset, I grabbed a beer and went back to the porch. The sky was burning orange, the kind of color that makes even bad days look cinematic. I sat there, sipping quietly, watching the world turn gold, when Jasmine finally appeared in the doorway. She didn't say anything at first, just stood there, arms folded, looking like a woman torn between pride and exhaustion. "You're drinking again?" she asked finally. "Yeah," I said, "doctor's orders." He said 1 beer a day keeps the delusion away. She sighed. "You think this is funny?" "I think it's survival," I said. She walked closer, stopping at the edge of the porch. "You humiliated me, Aaron." I looked at her, really looked at her. The woman I'd once built dreams with. "No, Jasmine," I said quietly. "You humiliated yourself. I just stopped cleaning up after you." Her lips trembled for half a second. Then she turned and went back inside. I sat there for a long time after that, listening to the sound of her footsteps fade. I wasn't angry anymore, just tired. Tired of performing. Tired of apologizing for being human in her pursuit of perfect. By the time the stars showed up, I made my decision. No more jokes at my expense. No more unpaid emotional labor. No more playing the sidekick in someone else's show. I finished my beer, looked out at the quiet street, and whispered to no one in particular, "I'm done being the clown." And for the first time in a long time, I actually meant it. I used to think nothing in suburbia could surprise me anymore. After the auction night fiasco, the shouting match, and my porch therapy session with Taylor, I figured Jasmine and I had hit peak dysfunction. I was wrong. Maplewood Heights, it turns out, had one more trick up its neatly ironed sleeve. And like most HOA-approved disasters, it started with perfume. A week had passed since the party fallout. We'd settled into a new kind of Cold War. No shouting, no apologies, just polite silence that could frost glass. Jasmine and I lived in the same house, like co-workers avoiding eye contact in the break room. She made breakfast without speaking. I drank coffee without feeling. The tension was so thick Ronald could have written a rule about it. On Monday morning, she announced she was joining a new yoga class. At Midtown Wellness, she said, pouring herself orange juice. They have a rooftop session. Very exclusive. "Rooftop yoga," I said, stirring my coffee. "What's the workout?" "Balancing your marriage on the edge." She gave me that corporate smile she used when she decided I was beneath conversation. You wouldn't understand. She wasn't wrong. The first few days, I didn't care. She'd leave around noon, dressed like she was heading to an audition for Yoga with the Stars, and come back 3 hours later glowing and relaxed. At first, I thought maybe this was good for her. Hell, maybe even for us. Maybe she was finally sweating out some of the venom. Then Wednesday happened. I'd come home early from work. Paul, my coworker and unofficial therapist, had forced me to take a half day after I zoned out during a meeting and responded to a budget question with, "My wife auctioned me for a burger." HR wasn't amused. So there I was, driving down Maplewood's picture-perfect street, when I saw Jasmine's car parked not at the yoga studio downtown, but right outside the same rooftop restaurant where the neighborhood wives like to gossip. And sitting across from her at an outdoor table, laughing like they were starring in a cologne commercial, was Chase. Yeah, that Chase. My buyer from the auction night. I parked 2 blocks away and just sat there, watching through my windshield like a bad movie I couldn't turn off. Jasmine was wearing a flowy white blouse, hair pinned up, perfume visible from orbit. Chase leaned in close, his hand brushing hers in that casual, "Oops, didn't mean to" way men use when they've already meant to. She giggled, my wife, who hadn't laughed at one of my jokes in months. Giggled like she was 17 and being told she looked cute in her prom dress. I felt something inside me twist, but not in the explosive, flip the table way I expected. It was quieter, heavier, like I was watching someone else's life implode and just happened to be in the wrong seat. I wanted to storm over, slam my keys on the table, and ask, "So this your new investment portfolio?" But instead, I stayed put. Just watched. Because I didn't need words. I needed proof. An hour later, they left together. She touched his arm. He opened her car door. They drove off. I followed at a distance, slow enough not to be noticed, close enough to end my delusion. They didn't go to another restaurant. They didn't stop for gas. They went straight to a boutique hotel downtown, the kind of place that charges by the hour for privacy. My stomach dropped. My heart didn't even race. It just stopped caring. I parked across the street, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. My phone sat on the dashboard, the camera app open. 2 photos. That's all I took. Her walking in. Him holding the door. Their laughter mid-frame. It was mundane, almost boring, and somehow that made it worse. I sat there for a long time, the world blurring around me. Then I exhaled. Slowly. Calmly. It wasn't anger. It wasn't heartbreak. It was realization. You don't argue with a fire alarm. You just leave the building. I drove home in silence. Every stoplight, every turn felt cinematic, like the world had slowed to let me grieve in peace. I passed Ronald trimming his hedge with the precision of a surgeon and thought, man, if only people cared about their relationships the way they care about their lawns. When I walked into the house, it smelled like lemon cleaner and lies. Everything was perfect. Pillows fluffed, candles lit, jazz playing softly. A performance, as always. I went upstairs, opened my laptop, and transferred the photos to a private folder titled Reality Check. That night, when Jasmine came home, she was glowing again. Yoga was great, she said, voice light, smile effortless. Yeah, I asked, not looking up from my laptop. You should come next time. Oh, I'd love to, I said. Do they offer a couples package? 2 mats, 1 moral compass? She froze. Just a flicker. Then the mask returned. You're in one of your moods again. Maybe, I said. Or maybe I just see things for what they are. She tilted her head. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing, I said. Just thinking how interesting it is that yoga can make someone smell like men's cologne. Her smile faltered. You're imagining things. Probably, I said, closing the laptop. But imagination's all I've had lately. She left the room without another word. And that was fine, because I didn't need an argument. I already had my answer. The next few days were strange. I didn't confront her again. Didn't snoop, didn't shout, didn't even act suspicious. I just observed. She started dressing better, talking softer, smiling more. The same routine. Leave at noon, back at 3. Always yoga, always glowing. Meanwhile, I started packing emotional boxes in my head, sorting through memories, labeling them. Good times, fake smiles, unpaid therapy sessions. I even stopped responding to her small talk. When she said, "The Hendersons invited us to dinner," I said, "They can invite whoever's still married." Paul noticed the shift first. We were at the office, eating lunch, and he asked, "You good, man?" "I'm great," I said deadpan. Turns out peace of mind fits perfectly in a 32 gigabytes photo folder. He blinked. "You caught her." "Caught?" "No," I said. "Confirmed." He leaned back, whistling low. "Damn. You okay?" I shrugged. "Yeah, just figuring out what freedom looks like." "Divorce?" he asked. "Eventually," I said. "But first, I want her to know I'm done without me having to say it. I want her to feel it." That night, Jasmine tried to sit beside me on the couch. I didn't move, didn't lean away. I just stared at the TV. She put a hand on my leg, testing the waters. "You're quiet lately," she said. "Am I?" "Yes, and I don't like it." "That's fair," I said. "But you don't have to like everything I do." She frowned. "Erin, I'm trying here." "Are you?" I turned to her then. "Because from where I'm sitting, you're just rehearsing new lines." Her eyes darted away. "You're being paranoid." "Maybe, but at least I'm not pretending." She stood up, crossed her arms. "I don't know what you're implying." I smiled. "Then you're better at lying than I thought." For a second, she looked like she might fight back, scream, something, but she didn't. Instead, she straightened her posture, took a deep breath, and said, "I'm not doing this with you." Then she walked out. Again. And I let her. The next day, I took the morning off. I told my boss I had a personal audit. Drove downtown. Parked across from that same boutique hotel. And right on schedule, her car showed up. Different outfit this time. Light blue dress, sunglasses, her effortlessly innocent look. 10 minutes later, Chase's black SUV pulled up. They walked in hand this time. No hesitation. No guilt. I didn't even take new photos. I didn't need to. I'd already accepted it. As I drove home, I thought about the irony. All those years of Jasmine preaching about image, status, control, and this was the real her. Just another scandal hidden behind manicured lawns and polite hellos. I laughed out loud, not because it was funny, but because it was so painfully predictable. When I got home, I opened the fridge, grabbed a beer, and sat on the couch. For the first time in months, the house felt calm. Not peaceful, calm. The difference mattered. Peace is earned. Calm is what's left when you stop caring. Later that night, I got a text from Taylor. Just 2 words, you know? I stared at the screen for a moment, then typed back, "Yeah, I know." A minute later, she replied, "I'm sorry." I didn't respond. Because honestly, she had nothing to apologize for. We were both collateral damage in the same HOA soap opera. By the time Jasmine came home, it was past midnight. She crept in quietly, probably thinking I was asleep. I wasn't. I just watched her from the shadows of the hallway as she tiptoed upstairs, heels in hand, guilt barely concealed under foundation. The next morning, I made breakfast, bacon, eggs, coffee, a domestic peace offering that meant absolutely nothing. When she came downstairs, I smiled. "Morning, sunshine." She blinked, suspicious. "You're in a good mood." "Yeah," I said. "Had a great night's sleep." She sat across from me, cautiously. "That's nice." "It is," I said, sipping my coffee. "Funny thing about rest, you get plenty once you stop giving a damn." She tilted her head, confused. "What's that supposed to mean?" I just smiled. "You'll find out soon." And as she stared at me, calculating, nervous, trying to decode my calm, I realized I'd already won. Not because I'd caught her, but because, for the first time in years, I wasn't chasing her approval. She was the storm now, and I was finally the eye. The day it all finally snapped wasn't dramatic at first. It was a Thursday, gray skies, drizzle outside, the kind of weather that makes you want soup and therapy. I was working from home, pretending to care about a spreadsheet while my brain ran in circles. Every email I typed sounded professional on the surface. "Please see attached." But underneath, it was just "please see attached" evidence of my broken marriage. By then, I'd stopped sleeping properly. Every night, I'd lie awake listening to the sound of her breathing, wondering how someone could sleep so peacefully after detonating a life. Jasmine was a master of calm chaos. She could ruin you with a smile and wake up glowing. But that Thursday, something inside me shifted. I didn't wake up angry. I woke up done. The kind of done that feels clean, like wiping a chalkboard. She left around noon for yoga again, perfume cloud trailing behind her, high heels clicking across tile like punctuation marks in a lie. The front door closed, and the silence that followed wasn't painful anymore. It was relief wearing quiet shoes. I went upstairs, opened our walk-in closet, and just stood there. Her side looked like a boutique exploded, color-coordinated outfits, shoes lined up by heel height, purses stacked like trophies. My side looked like a survival shelter. The contrast made me laugh, low and bitter. "Guess which one of us is living an actual life?" I muttered. Then I grabbed the biggest suitcase she owned, the silver Samsonite she called her Paris bag. Even though the closest it ever got to France was duty-free perfume at JFK, and started packing. Not mine. Hers. I didn't fold anything neatly. I wasn't angry enough to destroy things, but I wasn't gentle either. I just scooped her world off the hangers and dropped it into the bag. Blouses, heels, makeup bags, curling iron, everything. Each zip sounded like closure. About halfway through, I paused. Sitting on the top shelf was the wedding album. Thick, white leather, gold trim, the kind of thing people pay to cry over years later. I pulled it down, flipped it open. Page 1. Me grinning like an idiot. Her in lace and light. The picture of forever. I stared at it for a long time. Then I smiled, small, tired, but real, and said out loud, "Guess forever got a lease renewal notice." I tossed the album into the suitcase. Fitting, really. She could take the fairy tale with her. By the time she came home that evening, the rain had stopped, but the house felt heavy with something else, like the air itself knew what was about to happen. She walked in wearing sunglasses even though it was dusk, talking on the phone, laughing that fake, flirty laugh she reserved for people who weren't me. She didn't notice the suitcase by the front door at first. She was halfway through saying, "You're terrible, stop," when she turned, froze, and went silent. Her eyes darted from the bag to me, sitting on the couch with my laptop closed and a calmness that scared even me. "What's this?" she asked, voice too steady. "Early checkout," I said, taking a sip of my beer. "No deposit refund." She blinked. Once. Twice. "Excuse me. Not that complicated, Jasmine," I said, leaning back. "Your stuff's packed. You can take the lies too if you've got space." Her mouth opened, closed. Then came the act. Confusion, innocence, outrage, all rehearsed. "Erin, what are you talking about?" I pulled out my phone, opened the photo folder, and turned it toward her. 2 pictures. Her. Chase. The hotel. She stared at them, lips parting slightly. For one brief second, I saw it, the flicker of fear behind her eyes. Then it vanished, replaced by a smirk. "So," she said softly, "you finally caught up." "Caught up," I said. "Jasmine, this isn't a marathon. You don't get a medal for cheating creatively." She crossed her arms, chin high. "You think this makes you strong? Throwing me out?" "No," I said, standing. "It makes me free." For the first time in months, my voice didn't shake. It didn't beg. It just stood. She stared at me for a moment, then laughed. It wasn't her real laugh, the one she used to have when she'd steal fries from my plate. This one was sharp, brittle. "You'll regret this, Erin. You can't just end it." "Oh, I can. You already did the hard part for me. I'm just doing the cleanup." Her jaw tightened. "Where do you expect me to go?" "You've got options," I said. "Hotels, Chase's place, Ronald's guest house. Hell, maybe the HOA will build you a shrine." That hit. She flinched. "You're cruel." "No," I said quietly. "I'm finally learning from you." She stood there, trembling, not from fear, but from the realization that she couldn't manipulate her way out of this one. Then, in a final act of pride, she grabbed the suitcase handle, straightened her posture, and said, "Fine, if this is what you want." "It's what's left," I replied. She started wheeling the bag toward the door. Halfway there, she stopped, turned around, and said, "You know, Chase isn't who you think he is." I smiled faintly. "Oh, I know exactly who he is. Another guy who'll learn you can't outshine your own shadow." She didn't have a comeback for that. Just turned, opened the door, and left. The sound of the suitcase wheels bumping down the front steps was oddly satisfying, like applause after the final act of a bad play. When the door clicked shut, I waited for something to happen. For guilt, maybe, or relief. Instead, there was just quiet. A strange, healing kind of quiet. The kind that feels earned. I stood there for a while, looking at the space she'd filled for years. The house was still, the air lighter. My heart wasn't racing. It was steady, peaceful. I grabbed my phone, opened my messages, and texted Paul, taking a few days off. Got promoted to single. His reply came instantly. "Finally, man. I was about to nominate you for sainthood." I laughed. A real laugh this time. The first in months. The next morning, I woke up at 8 a.m. and didn't dread it. Made my own breakfast, played music I liked, didn't check my phone for her texts because there weren't any. The sun was streaming through the kitchen window, and for the first time, the house felt like mine. Around noon, I went outside to the porch. The neighborhood was its usual Stepford calm. Ronald jogging with perfect posture, Taylor trimming her roses, pretending not to notice me. She finally looked up, our eyes met, and she gave a small nod. It wasn't pity. It was respect. The kind that says, "Good. You did it." I raised my coffee mug in a silent toast. She smiled, half sad, half approving, then went back to her roses. I sat there for an hour, just breathing. You don't realize how heavy constant tension is until it's gone. Every creak, every sigh, every drip from the gutter sounded like music. At some point, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered. "Hey," a male voice said. "Is this Erin?" "Yeah." "Who's asking?" "It's Chase." My stomach went cold, but not from fear. More like curiosity. "Wow," I said. "You've got nerve." "Look," he said quickly. "I didn't know she was still with you." "She said you were separated." "Ah," I said. "Classic Jasmine. Facts optional, Drama guaranteed. He exhaled. I'm sorry, man. Really. I leaned back in my chair. You're not sorry. You're scared she's your problem now. He went quiet. Don't worry, I added. She's all yours. Just keep receipts for the therapy bills. He started to say something else, but I hung up. That conversation wasn't for me. It was for him. He just didn't know it yet. Later that night, I found one of her scarves on the back of the couch. It smelled like her perfume, sweet, expensive, suffocating. I stared at it for a long time, then opened the window and let the breeze take it. Watching it flutter away felt like hitting unsubscribe from toxicity. For dinner, I ordered pizza. Extra cheese, no guilt. I sat on the couch, greasy box on my lap, watching an old action movie. No judgmental comments about carbs before bedtime. No lectures about presentation. Just me and the sound of explosions that, for once, weren't emotional. Halfway through the movie, Taylor texted, heard she left. You okay? I replied, better than okay. I'm breathing again. She sent back a smile emoji and nothing more. Sometimes silence says everything. Before bed, I walked through the house one last time. The empty closet, the quiet bathroom, the absence of perfume in the air, it all felt like victory disguised as emptiness. The good kind of empty, the kind you can build something new inside. I climbed into bed, stretched out across the whole mattress, and laughed to myself. Man, this side's comfortable too. As I drifted off, I realized something simple but profound. Leaving someone isn't always about anger. Sometimes it's about remembering you deserve peace. And as sleep finally claimed me, one thought settled in my chest like a heartbeat. I wasn't losing a wife. I was losing a warden. And freedom, as it turns out, fits perfectly in a silver suitcase. The morning after Jasmine left was strange in the way silence becomes its own language. I woke up expecting chaos. An argument, a slammed door, a sarcastic, good morning, that wasn't actually good. Instead, I woke up to birds and sunlight leaking through the blinds. No perfume in the air. No hair straightener whining from the bathroom. No background humming of disapproval. It was peaceful. Too peaceful. The kind that makes you check if you accidentally died in your sleep. I walked downstairs, barefoot, coffee mug in hand, and the first thing I noticed was the echo. Every step sounded louder, sharper. That's when it hit me. This house had never been quiet before. It had always been filled with Jasmine's curated noise, playlists, phone calls, the sound of her heels declaring importance. Without her, Maplewood Heights finally sounded real. I made coffee, strong, black, judgment-free, and stood by the window, staring across the street. Taylor's house looked the same as always. Blinds half open, a vase of roses in the front window, the faint shape of her moving through the kitchen. She had that way about her, composed even in the middle of chaos. I'd learned that the hard way during the past month, watching her keep up appearances while her husband, Chase, strutted around like a walking cliché in running shorts and a guilty conscience. I thought about the photos sitting in my laptop, the evidence, the proof, the betrayal. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about closure. The truth deserved to be free, and I was done being the only one carrying it. Around noon, I decided. I wasn't going to text her, wasn't going to call. Some things you don't send digitally. Some truths deserve eye contact. So, I grabbed my phone, slipped on a hoodie, and walked across the street. Taylor opened the door before I could knock, like she already knew. Maybe she'd been waiting for this. Her face said it all, tired eyes, perfect posture, the quiet strength of someone who's been pretending everything's fine for too long. Aaron, she said softly, stepping aside. Come in. The smell of her house was different from mine. Warmer. Lived in. There were photos on the mantle, vacations, barbecues, fake smiles frozen in time. I recognized that look. I'd worn it myself. She gestured to the couch. Coffee. Tea. Water's fine, I said, because coffee with someone else's wife felt too familiar now. She poured me a glass, sat across from me, and folded her hands like she was bracing for impact. You know, don't you? She asked quietly. I didn't say anything right away. Just pulled out my phone, opened the photos, and slid it across the table. Her eyes flicked to the screen. One photo, then another. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for the glass of water, but she didn't cry. She didn't even gasp. She just looked down, lips pressed together, and whispered, okay. That single word hit harder than any scream. After a long pause, She exhaled, slow and steady. I knew something was wrong, she said finally. The late meetings. The cologne that wasn't his. The new phone he never let me touch. She gave a small, bitter laugh. I just didn't want to be the crazy wife. You're not, I said. You're the last sane person in this zip code. She smiled faintly at that. A small, sad smile. Thank you for showing me. I didn't do it to hurt you, I said, leaning forward. I just couldn't let you keep living in the lie. I know what that feels like. Pretending you don't know what everyone else already suspects. She nodded. It's like being the last person to show up to a joke about your own life. We sat in silence after that. No words left to pad the truth. The air between us was heavy but honest, and that alone felt like healing. Then she surprised me. Do you still love her? The question came out soft, curious, not accusatory. I thought about it longer than I should have. No, I said eventually. But I miss who I thought she was. Taylor nodded slowly, like she understood that too well. Yeah, that's the hardest part, isn't it? Mourning someone who's still alive. Her voice cracked just a little on that last word, and I felt something twist inside me. This wasn't two neighbors gossiping over scandal anymore. This was two people staring at the wreckage of trust, realizing their stories shared the same wrecking ball. Finally, she stood up. I'm going to confront him. You don't have to rush, I said gently. No, she replied, calm but firm. I do. If I wait, I'll lose my nerve. And he'll keep lying. She walked toward the stairs, then paused and looked back at me. Thank you, Aaron. Really? I nodded. For what? For not making it worse. That one stung a little, but in a good way. Because she was right. This wasn't about revenge. It was about ending the performance. When I got home, I didn't go inside right away. I sat on the porch, nursing a beer, waiting for the storm. It didn't take long. Around 6, I heard shouting. Taylor's voice, steady, sharp, breaking through the calm of Maplewood Heights like thunder splitting the sky. Don't lie to me, Chase. I saw the photos. Then his voice, defensive, desperate. It's not what it looks like. Classic line. I actually laughed. Because of course it was what it looked like. It always is. The argument went on for maybe 10 minutes. I didn't try to eavesdrop, but this was Maplewood. Sound carried like gossip. At one point, something slammed. A door maybe. Then silence. Not polite silence. Final silence. A few minutes later, her front door opened. Taylor stepped out, face streaked with tears, shoulders squared like armor. She saw me watching and didn't look away. I raised my beer slightly, an unspoken I'm sorry. She gave the smallest nod, the kind of nod that said me too. 2 days later, Chase's car was gone. Just like that. The neighborhood buzzed with whispers. They're having issues. It's temporary. They'll work it out. Maplewood's favorite pastime, repainting scandals in neutral tones. I didn't participate. I didn't need to. For once, I wasn't the headline. I was just the quiet guy on the porch, drinking his beer, watching the circus from the cheap seats. Over the next week, the energy shifted. People looked at me differently, not pitying, but curious. The men gave me respectful nods. The women smiled longer than usual. I guess in suburbia, surviving humiliation earns you celebrity status. Taylor, meanwhile, kept her head high. She started jogging in the mornings, no makeup, no pretense. The first time I saw her, I called out, "You're braver than me. I only run from my problems, not for cardio." She laughed, a real laugh, free of bitterness. "Running's cheaper than therapy," she said. We started talking more after that. Nothing romantic. Just easy, human conversations about real things. Life, work, surviving Maplewood without losing your mind. She had this way of making silence comfortable again. One evening, she came over to borrow my ladder for something. We ended up sitting on the porch for hours, trading stories over beers and sarcastic wisdom. "I used to think marriage was about compromise," she said, staring at the streetlights. "Now I think it's about who can keep pretending the longest." I chuckled. "Sounds about right. We should start a support group. Recovering Optimists Anonymous." She grinned. "First meetings at your place?" "Only if you bring snacks," I said. That became our thing. Banter, not flirtation. Connection, not complication. She understood the language of disappointment fluently, and somehow, that made it easier to breathe. One night, maybe 2 weeks after everything, we sat outside while the rest of the neighborhood glowed behind their curated curtains. "You ever wonder what they think of us?" she asked. "All the time," I said. "And I've decided I don't care." Let them have their perfect illusions. I'll take peace over reputation any day. She nodded, quiet for a moment, then smiled. You're not like the rest of them. Thanks, I said. I'm still deciding if that's a compliment or a warning. Both, she said. We laughed, and for the first time in what felt like forever, it wasn't forced. It wasn't performance. It was just two people finding humor and surviving. The next morning, Ronald stopped me while I was taking out the trash. Rough few weeks, huh? He said, pretending to sound sympathetic, but looking like a man who couldn't wait to update the HOA gossip channel. I smiled. Not rough. Cleansing. He blinked. Excuse me. You know how you trim your hedges so they don't grow wild? Same idea. He nodded slowly, clearly not understanding, but too polite to admit it. I walked away before he could start talking about community values. By Sunday, the whispers had moved on to someone else's drama. Maplewood's memory span was shorter than a TikTok video. But I didn't care. I wasn't trying to win anymore. I wasn't playing. Taylor and I still talked, but we kept it neighborly. A wave here, a shared joke there. She brought over cookies one day. Real, homemade ones, not the store-bought kind Jasmine used to plate and lie about. I took a bite and said, if you ever need a business partner, I can handle taste testing. She laughed. Deal. But I'm keeping 90% ownership. Spoken like someone who's finally learned her worth, I said. She paused at that, met my eyes, and smiled softly. Guess we both did. That night, I sat on my porch again, watching the stars. The street was quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't demand attention. It just exists. For the first time since moving here, I felt like I belonged. Not because I fit in, but because I'd stopped trying to. Somewhere across the street, Taylor's porch light flicked off. A dog barked in the distance. The world felt small, manageable, honest. And as I leaned back, sipping my beer, I realized something. The truth doesn't just hurt, it heals. Slowly, awkwardly, but it does. Because when lies finally cross the street, they take the noise with them. And what's left, what's real, is quiet, steady, and finally mine. You don't really notice how loud your life has been until silence moves in and refuses to pay rent. The first week after everything blew up, the quiet felt foreign, like I'd been dropped into someone else's life. I'd wake up in the middle of the night expecting to hear Jasmine brushing her hair, or humming while scrolling through her phone, or muttering about how the lighting in this room was emotionally draining. Instead, there was nothing. Just me, the steady tick of the kitchen clock, and the faint sound of my sanity stretching its legs for the first time in years. At first, it was disorienting. I'd find myself doing things just to fill the space. The TV stayed on constantly, cycling through old shows I didn't care about. I kept the windows open during the day so I could hear passing cars and lawnmowers, proof I wasn't alone in the world. But eventually, the noise stopped being comforting. It started feeling unnecessary. I didn't need distraction anymore. I needed stillness. So I turned everything off. That first night of pure quiet was weirdly powerful. I sat in the living room with a glass of whiskey and listened to nothing. No jazz playlists, no tapping heels, no shallow laughter echoing through a spotless house. Just me. The refrigerator hummed softly, and I realized I'd never actually heard it before. That's how much background chaos we'd built around ourselves. Silence had to fight for a chance to exist. The next morning, I started rebuilding when Ed from next door, retired Marine, part-time philosopher, saw me cleaning the garage. He waved from his driveway. Looks like freedom, kid, he shouted. Feels like therapy, I shouted back. He laughed, walked over, and handed me a dumbbell. You're looking soft. Come to my place at 6 tomorrow. We lift, we complain, we survive. That's how my accidental gym membership started. Ed's gym was really just a shed with mismatched weights and motivational posters from the 80s. But it worked. We'd lift, grunt, and talk about nothing important. Politics, sports, how lawn fertilizer was a scam. Somewhere between sets, he dropped nuggets of accidental wisdom. Marriage is like squatting wrong, he said one morning. Looks fine at first, then bam, back pain for life. Sounds accurate. I grunted. He nodded. You'll be fine, son. Divorce burns calories. I laughed harder than I had in months. Meanwhile, the rest of Maplewood Heights pretended not to know my life story. That's how this place works. You're only scandalous until someone else screws up louder. The Wilsons' teenager crashed their SUV into a lamppost, and suddenly my failed marriage was old news. Ronald even waved at me one morning without the usual HOA smugness. I waved back because why not? Peace wasn't about holding grudges. It was about not letting other people rent space in my head anymore. At work, people noticed the change too. Paul, my coworker, leaned over my desk one afternoon and whispered, "You're smiling." Like on purpose. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said. Turns out silence is underrated. He blinked. "Did you join a cult?" "Just join myself," I said, and went back to typing. Life became simpler after that. Not easier, exactly, just lighter. I didn't need validation or apology anymore. I stopped replaying every argument in my head, stopped wondering if I'd been enough. The answer didn't matter. Some people aren't looking for love, they're looking for an audience. I finally stopped buying tickets. One Saturday morning, I caught myself whistling while making breakfast. Actual whistling. I burned the toast, but it felt like progress. The house no longer felt like a museum of broken promises. It felt lived in. Human. That afternoon, Taylor dropped by to return my ladder. She stood at the porch holding a six-pack. "Peace offering," she said. "I borrowed it for too long." "Peace accepted," I said, stepping aside. She handed me a beer, took one for herself, and looked around. "It's quieter here." "Yeah," I said. "Finally fits the size of my soul." She smiled at that. One of those genuine smiles that start in the eyes. "You look different," she said. "Happier." "Yeah," I said again. Turns out sleeping through the night without passive aggression is good for the skin. We sat on the porch, drinking and talking about everything but the past. About the weather, the insane price of gas, Ed's conspiracy theories about pigeons being drones. It wasn't flirty, it was healing. She told me she'd taken up painting again. I told her I'd started fixing up the house. "No theme," I said proudly. "Just chaos I can live with." "Sounds like freedom," she said. "It is." At one point, she went quiet, just looking out at the street. "You know, people think peace is boring," she said softly. "But after everything, I think boring's the dream." I nodded. I used to think love meant fireworks. Now I just want steady Wi-Fi and no emotional explosions. She laughed, and we clinked bottles. Over time, our friendship became part of that quiet I was learning to protect. She'd wave from her yard, I'd wave back. Some evenings we'd sit outside, trading sarcastic observations about Maplewood's endless quest for perfection. One night, a new couple moved in down the street. We watched them unload a giant marble fountain. "New blood," she said. "They'll learn." "Should we tell them about Ronald's HOA commandments?" I asked. "Nah," she said, sipping her beer. "Let them suffer. It's tradition." And we laughed, because it felt good to be on the other side of the chaos. Months passed quietly. Jasmine didn't call, didn't text, didn't try to come back. I think she finally realized the audience was gone. I'd heard through the neighborhood grapevine that Chase had moved out of state for work, and she'd followed him, because of course she did. Chasing her own name to death. Fitting, really. Sometimes, though, I catch myself wondering if she ever thought about me. Not in a longing way, just curious. Did she ever regret it? Did she miss the man who used to build her dreams before she decided she could do better? I'd never know. And honestly, I didn't need to. Closure isn't about answers. It's about not needing them. One afternoon, I was fixing the mailbox when Ed came by. "You look different," he said. "You're standing taller." "Yeah," I said. "Turns out carrying less baggage helps posture." He grinned. "I told you. Divorce burns calories." "Guess I'm getting shredded then," I said. He chuckled, clapped me on the back, and said, "Keep it that way. Don't let anyone bring the noise back." I didn't plan to. By late spring, the house had transformed. The sterile whites and golds Jasmine loved were replaced with deep blues, warm woods, and actual personality. I hung a dartboard where her inspirational quotes used to be. Every time I hit the bullseye, I said, "For closure." The fridge had beer, not sparkling water. The pantry had chips, not quinoa. It wasn't healthy, maybe, but it was mine. One evening, Taylor stopped by again, holding a small canvas. "I painted this," she said, handing it to me. "It's the view from your porch." It was simple, just a quiet street under a sunset sky. No people, no drama, no perfection. Just peace. "It's beautiful," I said. She shrugged. "It's honest." We stood there for a moment, and I realized how far we'd both come. Two people who'd been humiliated, gaslit, and broken down. Now sharing laughter, quiet, and freedom. No promises, No expectations. Just existence. And that was enough. After she left, I hung the painting above my couch. It fit perfectly, not because of color or size, but because it belonged. That night, as I sat on the porch with a beer, Ed's voice echoed in my head. "Freedom looks good on you, kid." He was right. It did. The sky was purple, the cicadas loud, the neighborhood calm. For once, I wasn't waiting for the next argument or apology. I was just there, present, grounded, alive. Paul texted me around 9. "You ever think about dating again?" I replied, "Eventually. For now, I'm dating silence." She listens better. He sent a laughing emoji and a beer mug. I leaned back, smiling. I didn't need the noise anymore. Didn't need to prove anything. My life was no longer an audition, it was a homecoming. And maybe someday, when the time's right, someone new will sit beside me on this porch. Someone who likes real over perfect, laughter over image. But until then, the quiet is enough. Because peace, once you fight for it, becomes sacred. As the streetlights flickered on, I raised my beer toward the empty driveway across the street. The one that used to hold Chase's fancy SUV, the one that used to remind me what betrayal looked like. Now it just reminded me that everything temporary eventually makes space for what's true. I whispered to the night, half sarcastic, half grateful, "Here's to quiet. May it never shut up." And for the first time in a long, long time, I didn't just hear silence. I heard peace answering back. The funny thing about peace is that it doesn't make a sound when it arrives. It just sneaks in, takes its shoes off, and sits quietly on the couch like it's been there all along. By the time the next HOA meeting rolled around, I was fluent in silence. I no longer needed caffeine to survive mornings or sarcasm to survive Jasmine. Life had finally settled into something I hadn't experienced in years. Normal. Real, messy, wonderfully boring normal. But of course, Maplewood Heights wasn't built for normal. It was built for performance, and nothing draws an audience like a scandal that refuses to stay buried. The meeting was held in Ronald's oversized living room, which smelled like air freshener and moral superiority. Folding chairs lined up in perfect rows. Neighbors clutching clipboards and bottled water as if the fate of civilization depended on street parking regulations. I wasn't planning to speak. I just came for the free cookies and to make sure Ronald didn't sneak in another rule about acceptable garage paint colors. Taylor sat 2 chairs down, wearing a calm expression that said she'd reached enlightenment, or maybe just a good lawyer. When our eyes met, she smirked. "You ready for another round of suburban drama?" I whispered back, "Always." I live for Ronald's sermons on mulch thickness. The meeting droned on as expected. Ronald cleared his throat every 3 minutes to remind us how important he was. "Community image," he said, "is everything. We must uphold the standard." His voice oozed the same artificial sweetness as the cookies on the table. And then, because the universe loves poetic timing, Nicole decided to speak. Nicole was Jasmine's best friend. The same Nicole who'd spent the entire party laughing when Jasmine tried to auction me off for a burger. She was the queen bee of gossip, the neighborhood's self-appointed news anchor. She stood up, adjusting her pastel cardigan like she was about to deliver a TED Talk. "I'd just like to remind everyone that we need to be mindful of how our personal choices affect the neighborhood's reputation." She smiled sweetly. "We don't want Maplewood associated with questionable behavior." The room hummed with fake agreement. A few people nodded like bobbleheads. I saw Taylor's lips twitch, fighting a grin. Nicole wasn't done. She looked directly at me, the kind of look that dripped with condescension and thinly veiled satisfaction. Some people forget that their private affairs can reflect poorly on all of us, especially when they involve public spectacles. Oh, there it was. The jab. The callback to the auction. Subtle as a brick through a window. For a second, I considered letting it slide. I'd spent months cultivating peace, learning the art of walking away. But something in me, the part that once stood in a crowded living room holding a glass of wine while my wife sold me for a laugh, decided that silence wasn't always golden. Sometimes it needed to clap back. I stood up slowly, smiling the kind of smile that made HR nervous. "Nicole, you make an excellent point." She blinked, caught off guard by my calm tone. "Oh, thank you, Aaron. I just think." I cut her off gently. "Actually, since we're talking about community image, maybe we should discuss the things that really embarrass Maplewood. Like, say, People selling their spouses for a burger and $100. A ripple of laughter moved through the room. Some tried to hide it. Some didn't bother. Nicole froze. I didn't mean. Oh, I know, I said, leaning on the back of my chair. You were speaking generally. I just figured I'd be specific. You know, for transparency. The laughter grew louder. Even Ronald, moral guardian of HOA purity, was fighting a smirk. I went on, casually. And while we're being honest, let's give credit where it's due. That auction night did raise $1,000 for the neighborhood, if we count Chase's donation and all the therapy bills afterward. Taylor choked on her water. Someone at the back snorted. Nicole went crimson, muttered something about decorum, and sat down like a deflated balloon. Ronald tried to regain control, mumbling about keeping things civil, but it was too late. The meeting had shifted. The crowd was mine. I sat back down, calm as ever. Taylor leaned over and whispered, "That was evil." "Therapeutic," I corrected. Besides, if they wanted polite, they should have left me alone. When the meeting ended, people came up to shake my hand, pretending it was solidarity when really, they just loved the drama. Maplewood thrived on gossip, and I'd just fed it the juiciest dessert. Ronald gave me a subtle nod on the way out. Maplewood code for, I disapprove publicly but approve privately. As I walked home, Taylor caught up beside me. "You do realize you just made yourself a legend, right?" "Please," I said. "This neighborhood's memory resets every time someone gets new patio furniture." "Still," she said, smiling, "that was impressive. Jasmine would have hated every second." "Yeah," I said, looking up at the stars. "She probably felt it from wherever she's pretending to be happy." We walked in companionable silence the rest of the way. When we reached her house, she stopped and said, "For what it's worth, I'm glad you're still here." I smiled. "Me too." She nodded once, then went inside, leaving me standing there with the faint smell of jasmine flowers from her garden. Funny how life's sense of humor worked. The next day, I woke up to a text. Unknown number. For a moment, I thought it might be Jasmine, but no. She'd burned that bridge and probably sold the ashes. The message read, "You'll regret humiliating people publicly. Not everything's over." I chuckled and replied, "Whoever this is, please invoice me for the threat. I'm on a budget." No response. Typical. Maplewood loved anonymous bravery. Later that afternoon, Taylor stopped by with a plate of cookies. Real homemade ones again, still warm. "Just checking if you survived the hate mail," she joked. "Oh, I'm fine," I said. "They can send letters, but I pay the mortgage." "I win." She laughed, then leaned against the railing. "You know, for a guy who's been through hell, you're handling this disturbingly well." "Yeah," I said. "Turns out Rock Bottom has decent Wi-Fi." We sat outside again, the quiet between us easy and full. The sun dipped low, washing the street in orange light. "It's weird," she said after a while. "How peaceful things are now." "Yeah," I said. "It's almost suspicious." We both laughed. And just when I thought life couldn't throw me another curveball, Jasmine reappeared. It happened 3 days later. I was fixing a loose hinge on the front door when I heard a car pull up. I didn't even need to look. I knew the sound of that engine. The door creaked open, and there she was, same polished hair, same controlled smile, but something different in her eyes. The kind of tired you can't conceal with foundation. "Hi," she said softly. "Hi," I replied, not moving from the doorway. She looked around the house, the furniture, the details that no longer belonged to her. "You redecorated." "Yeah," I said. The house needed to breathe again. She nodded slowly, setting her purse down like it was fragile. "I came for the rest of my things." "Upstairs closet," I said, stepping aside. "You know the way." She paused, her hand hovering near the banister. "Aaron, this could have been different." I met her gaze evenly. Yeah, if respect came standard. Her eyes flickered, searching for the old me, the one who'd bend, the one who'd smooth things over. He wasn't home. She picked up her bag and turned toward the door. "I hope you're happy." "I am," I said. "It's weird at first, but you get used to it." For a moment, something softened in her expression. Not regret, just recognition. Then she nodded and walked out. No tears, no apologies, no dramatic music. Just the quiet click of a door that finally meant what it sounded like. Closure. That night, I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee instead of beer. Across the street, Taylor was watering her plants. She waved. I waved back. Simple. Peaceful. No pretending. As I sipped, I thought about everything that had happened. The move, the humiliation, the affair, the exit. Every version of me that had existed through it all. The man who tried too hard. The man who said nothing. The man who finally did. They'd all served their purpose. I smiled to myself, thinking about that night at the party. The auction. The laughter. Chase waving his wallet like a prize. And the moment I flipped it back on them. If someone told me then that one day I'd thank that humiliation, I'd have laughed. But here I was, free because of it. You can't buy self-respect. But watching someone choke on their own arrogance? That's priceless. I looked up at the stars, raised my mug, and said quietly, to peace, sarcasm, and second chances. From across the street, Taylor called out, talking to yourself again? Just to the universe, I said. Tell it thanks for me too, she replied. I laughed, the sound echoing through the calm night. Maybe someday there'd be something between us, maybe not. But right then, I didn't need romance. I didn't need closure. I didn't need the neighborhood's approval. I had my house, my quiet, my dignity. And that was worth more than every dollar Chase ever threw at a joke. Because in the end, life doesn't pay you back in cash. It pays you back in calm. And calm, I'd learned, was $1,000 feeling all its own.